remember, the instant you see those strobe-like flashes of red and blue occupy your rearview mirror, your body undergoes a profound physiological shift that you must be prepared to manage before the officer even reaches your door. It is a natural human response for your pulse to quicken and for a sense of dread to settle in your chest, regardless of whether you have done something wrong. As we navigate the transitional beauty of May, where the remnants of spring rain give way to the consistent warmth of the approaching summer, the roads are filled with a renewed energy that often translates to a higher frequency of police interactions. Whether you are driving to a family gathering or simply enjoying the late afternoon sun, the sudden interruption of a traffic stop requires an immediate transition from a relaxed state to one of hypervigilance and tactical calm. This period of the year, with its clear skies and increased outdoor activity, often sees law enforcement conducting more frequent checks and responding to reported incidents, which increases the statistical likelihood that a driver might be told they match a description of someone involved in a recent crime. To handle this effectively, you must first master your own nervous system. The adrenaline surging through your veins can lead to shaky hands or a stuttering voice, both of which can be misinterpreted by an officer as signs of guilt or evasion rather than simple common anxiety. By recognizing this physiological process, you can take proactive steps to ground yourself. Slow, deep breaths are your most effective tool here, helping to lower your heart rate and keep your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for logic and decision-making, engaged and online when you are pulling over. Do so in a manner that demonstrates you are a rational, predictable, and compliant driver. Find a spot that is safe for both you and the officer, even if it means driving a few hundred feet further to reach a well-lit area or a wide shoulder. Once stopped, turn off your engine and roll down your window. If it is late in the evening as the May sun sets later and later, turning on your interior dome light is a significant gesture of transparency that can immediately lower the tension of the encounter. Place your hands clearly on the steering wheel at the 10 and 2 positions. This physical posture is the universal language of non-aggression in the context of law enforcement. It tells the officer that you are not reaching for anything, and that you are waiting for their instructions. At this stage, your primary goal is to remain a calm non-threat. The officer is likely just as alert as you are, especially if they are operating under the premise that you match a description of a suspect. Their training emphasizes the unknown dangers of every stop, and your calm demeanor acts as a buffer against escalating those fears. Thinking clearly during these first few minutes is paramount because the words spoken now will set the tone for the entire interaction. If you allow panic to take over, you might find yourself speaking too quickly or offering information that isn't required, which can complicate your situation later. Remind yourself that a traffic stop is a temporary legal process, and your job is to navigate it with as much composure as you can muster. Understanding what a typical stop feels like from the other side of the badge can also help you maintain your cool. The officer's approach is often slow and deliberate, designed to scan the interior of your vehicle for any immediate safety concerns. They might touch the rear of your car, a tactic used to leave their fingerprints on the vehicle as evidence they were there, or use a flashlight to peer into the back seat. While these actions can feel intrusive or even aggressive, viewing them as standard procedural steps rather than personal attacks can help you keep your emotions in check. The moment the officer reaches your window and delivers the news that you match a description, it can feel like a direct accusation. However, in the realm of legal education, it is vital to understand that this is often a preliminary investigative tool. Your immediate response should not be one of outrage or a flurry of denials, but rather a quiet, focused readiness to listen and respond with precision. By keeping your hands visible and your voice steady, you are creating a professional environment for the conversation to follow. You are signaling that you are an informed citizen who understands the gravity of the situation, but will not be rattled by it. This mental preparation is the foundation upon which your legal rights are built. Without a calm mind, those rights are much harder to exercise effectively. As the scent of spring clover wafts through the open window, stay focused on the present moment, ignoring the urge to speculate on what might happen next, and concentrate on being the most composed version of yourself. This is the first and most important step in protecting your interests during any police encounter. Once the officer has reached your window and initiated contact, the interaction shifts from a silent observation to a verbal exchange where every word and gesture carries significant weight. Usually, the first request you will hear is for your driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. Even if the officer has just told you that you match the description of a suspect, it is crucial to remain focused on these standard procedural requirements first. Before you reach for your glove box, center console, or even your back pocket, you should verbalize your intent clearly. Simply stating, "Officer, my registration is in the glove box. May I reach for it?" creates a layer of transparency that significantly de-escalates the situation. It removes the element of surprise and ensures the officer knows exactly where your hands are going and why. Sudden or jerky movements, especially when an officer is already on high alert because of a matching description call, can lead to a rapid escalation that serves no one. As you move to retrieve these items, do so slowly and deliberately, keeping your other hand on the steering wheel if possible. If your paperwork is disorganized, take a moment to find the correct documents rather than handing over a stack of unrelated papers. This demonstrates that you are composed and in control of your surroundings, which can subtly influence the officer's perception of the encounter. When you hand over your identification, maintain a tone that is polite, respectful, and neutral. This is not the time for sarcasm, nor is it the time to demand why you were stopped in a confrontational manner. No. While you certainly have the right to know the reason for the stop, there is a strategic advantage to waiting for the officer to lead the conversation initially. If they reiterate that you match a description, a calm and professional acknowledgement is often the most effective path. You might say something as simple as, "I understand, officer," without admitting to any specific behavior or crime. This language is cooperative without being self-incriminating. Remember, the side of the road is rarely the place where you will win a legal argument or convince an officer they have made a mistake in their identification. Your goal at the window is to facilitate the administrative portion of the stop as smoothly as possible. This professionalism often works in your favor. Officers are accustomed to dealing with people who are angry, defensive, or dishonest. By being the exception, the driver who is calm and clearly communicative, you often lower the officer's defensive posture, which can lead to a more predictable and safer outcome for everyone involved. The paperwork itself serves as your primary form of verification. In general terms, your license proves you are legally allowed to operate the vehicle, while registration and insurance confirm the vehicle is compliant with state requirements. In many jurisdictions, the failure to provide these documents can escalate a simple stop into a more serious encounter, regardless of whether the initial reason for the stop, the description match, holds any weight. By having these items ready or knowing exactly where they are, you minimize the time spent in that vulnerable position at the side of the road. If the officer asks questions beyond the scope of your identity or the vehicle's status while they are reviewing your documents, you can remain polite while being cautious about how much information you volunteer. You are providing the necessary documentation as required by law, but you are not obligated to fill the silence with small talk or explanations of your day's activities. This balance of being polite but firm is a skill that takes practice but is essential for protecting your interests. It is about being a cooperative non-participant in any investigation that goes beyond the basic traffic or identification stop. De-escalation at the window is as much about what you don't do as what you do. Avoid reaching into areas of the car that the officer cannot see clearly, and avoid any sudden outbursts of emotion. If the officer's tone is sharp or if they seem frustrated, do not mirror that energy. Instead, maintain your steady, patient demeanor. If they ask you to step out of the vehicle, this is usually a command rather than a request, and for your safety, it is generally advised to comply while continuing to keep your hands visible. The transition from sitting in your car to standing outside is another high-stress moment where clear communication remains your best tool. You can ask, "Where would you like me to stand, officer?" to show you are following their lead on safety protocols. Throughout this entire window interaction, your primary objective is to move the process forward toward a resolution without providing any unnecessary friction. By handling the ID and paperwork phase with professional detachment, you are effectively managing the encounter and ensuring that your behavior remains above reproach should the details of the stop ever be reviewed in a legal setting later. Once the initial exchange of documents is complete, the interaction often moves into what is known as the investigative phase, where the officer's questions shift from administrative to probing. When an officer tells you that you match a description, they are frequently using that as a catalyst to begin an informal interrogation designed to gather more information than what is on your driver's license. They might ask where you are coming from, where you are going, what you have been doing today, or even who you were just with. While these questions can seem like polite small talk or routine procedure, it is essential to understand that in a legal context, they are investigative tools used to identify inconsistencies or find evidence that might support a prolonged detention. No, you have a fundamental right to remain silent, but the way you choose to exercise that right is critical to the flow of the encounter. Instead of being dismissive or confrontational, which can be interpreted as a sign of hostility or guilt, you can use neutral, non-aggressive phrases, stating, "Officer, I prefer not to discuss my personal business," or "I am choosing to remain silent," allows you to maintain your privacy while keeping the tone professional. It is a common misconception that you are legally required to answer every question an officer poses simply because you are the subject of a stop. In reality, once you have fulfilled your duty to provide identification and vehicle documents, your participation in the investigative dialogue is generally optional. Although the specific nuances of stop and identify statutes can vary significantly from one state to another, the transition from questioning to a request for a search is perhaps the most critical juncture of a traffic stop, especially when the matching a description premise is on the table. An officer may say, "Since you match the description of someone we are looking for, you wouldn't mind if I take a quick look in your trunk or your back seat, would you?" This is a specific request for your consent. It is vital to understand that if an officer already possesses the legal authority to search your vehicle, such as through a warrant or established probable cause, they typically will not ask for your permission. They will simply inform you that a search is occurring and may direct you to stand in a safe area. When an officer asks for your consent, it is often because they currently lack the necessary legal threshold to proceed without it. You have a constitutional protection against unreasonable searches and seizures, and you are fully within your rights to say, "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." This statement should be delivered clearly, calmly, without further elaboration. Denying a search is never an admission of guilt. It is the exercise of a protected right. Even if the officer becomes more insistent, suggests that your refusal is suspicious, or implies that a clean person would have nothing to hide, you should remain steadfast in your refusal. By clearly stating your lack of consent, you ensure that if a search is conducted anyway, your defense attorney will have the necessary grounds to challenge the legality of that search in a court of law. Furthermore, you must be aware of the plain view doctrine, which is a high-level legal concept that allows an officer to seize evidence of a crime without a warrant, if that evidence is clearly visible from a location where the officer has a legal right to be. During a traffic stop, the officer is legally permitted to stand outside your vehicle and look through your windows. If they see something in plain sight that they immediately recognize as contraband or evidence of a crime, that observation can provide the legal basis for a full search of the vehicle or even an arrest. This is why maintaining a clear and organized vehicle interior is a practical step for any driver. Beyond plain view, it is important to remember that the specific legal landscape is not a monolith across the United States. Some jurisdictions follow strict rules regarding Terry stops, which might allow an officer to conduct a limited pat-down of your outer clothing for weapons if they have a reasonable suspicion that you are armed and dangerous. A suspicion they might claim is heightened because you match a suspect's description. Other states may have different rules regarding how long an officer can detain you while waiting for a canine unit, or under what circumstances they can order you to perform certain actions. Because these rules are so dependent on local statutes and recent court rulings, your best defense is to understand these broad concepts: consent, plain view, and the right to remain silent, while acknowledging that their exact application will depend on the state you are in. By navigating these questions and search requests with a calm, informed mind, you are effectively managing the legal risks of the encounter. There may come a point in a traffic stop where the interaction moves beyond a routine exchange of information and enters what we call the escalation edge. This is the moment when the officer's questions become pointedly accusatory, or when it becomes clear that your attempts to be helpful and polite are not resolving the situation to the officer's satisfaction. If you find yourself in a position where the officer is repeatedly questioning your presence in the area or insisting that your description perfectly matches a suspect in a serious crime, you must recognize that the investigative window has effectively closed and the adversarial process has begun. At this specific juncture, your most powerful and protective tool is the absolute right to silence. It is a common human instinct to want to defend your character and explain away any misunderstandings, especially when you know you have done nothing wrong. However, once an officer has formed a certain level of suspicion, your words are no longer being heard as explanations. They are being parsed as potential evidence. This is where the principle of silence becomes your strongest shield. By clearly and respectfully stating that you will not answer any further questions without an attorney present, you are setting a legal boundary that shifts the burden of proof entirely onto the state. This is not an act of obstruction or a sign of guilt. It is the responsible invocation of a foundational legal protection designed to prevent self-incrimination and to ensure that justice is handled in a controlled environment rather than under the stress of a roadside detention. Staying safe and remaining factual are your primary objectives when the tension of a stop begins to peak. If an officer decides to place you under arrest or to conduct a search despite your clear lack of consent, the most dangerous thing you can do is to physically resist or attempt to impede their actions. In the eyes of the law, and for your own physical well-being, the side of the road is never the place to settle a legal dispute or to argue over the validity of a probable cause determination. Even if you are certain the officer is acting outside of their authority, or that their claim about you matching a description is demonstrably false, your response must remain non-physical and non-confrontational. If you are ordered to step out of the car, do so. If you are told to put your hands behind your back, comply without resistance. Your silence in these moments does not mean you are waiving your rights. Rather, it means you are preserving your ability to fight the case effectively later in a courtroom. The legal system provides mechanisms for addressing misconduct, illegal searches, and wrongful arrests, but those mechanisms can be severely undermined if you are also facing charges of resisting arrest or obstructing an officer. Keep your movements slow, keep your hands where they can be seen, and keep your verbal responses to the absolute minimum required to express your invocation of rights. By maintaining this factual, stoic presence, you are documenting through your behavior that you were a compliant and non-threatening individual, which can be a critical component of your defense strategy should the matter go before a judge. Understanding the principle of counsel means recognizing that you are not expected to be a legal expert in the heat of a traffic stop. The complexities of constitutional law and the nuances of state-specific statutes are why the right to an attorney exists. When you invoke the right to counsel, you are essentially saying that the conversation is over until a professional who understands your rights and the law can be present to advise you. This stops the flow of information that could be misinterpreted or used against you. It is important to remember that silence, when properly invoked, cannot be used as evidence of guilt in a criminal trial. During these high-pressure moments, it can be helpful to repeat a mental mantra of safety and silence. You are prioritizing your physical safety by complying with orders, and you are prioritizing your legal safety by remaining silent. This approach prevents you from making emotional statements that could complicate your legal standing later. If there are witnesses, or if you have a passenger, their role is also to remain calm and observant rather than engaging in the conflict. Every action you take at the edge of escalation should be viewed through the lens of how it will look later on a body camera or in a police report. A driver who is quiet, compliant, and clearly requests a lawyer presents a much more difficult target for unjust prosecution than one who becomes combative or provides a litany of contradictory statements in a frantic attempt to clear their name. The goal is to survive the encounter physically and legally, leaving the arguments for the appropriate venue where your rights are the primary focus. Once the police cruiser has pulled away and the immediate tension of the encounter begins to subside, your job is not yet finished, in fact. The most critical phase of protecting your legal interests often begins in the 5 to 10 minutes following a traffic stop. While the adrenaline is still present, your memory of the specific details is at its sharpest, and you must capitalize on this clarity before the passage of time or the relief of being home begins to blur the specifics of the conversation. Pull over to a safe location if you haven't already, or simply remain where you are and immediately document everything that occurred. Using a notepad or a voice recording app on your phone, record the exact time and location of the stop, the name and badge number of the officer, which they are generally required to provide upon request, and a detailed description of the patrol vehicle. Most importantly, record the specific phrasing the officer used when they claimed you matched a description. Did they specify what that description was, such as clothing, vehicle make, or a specific physical trait, or was the statement vague and general? This level of detail is invaluable for a legal professional who may later need to determine if the officer had the requisite reasonable suspicion to initiate the detention in the first place. Your documentation should be a neutral, factual account of what was said and done, devoid of emotional commentary, as this record could eventually serve as the foundation for a formal complaint or a legal defense. Adopting a documentation mindset also involves identifying any potential external evidence that might support your version of events. If your vehicle is equipped with a dash cam, ensure that the footage from the stop is saved and backed up immediately, as some systems overwrite data after a certain period. Take note of any public or private surveillance cameras that may have captured the interaction, such as those at a nearby gas station or intersection. If there were passengers in your car or pedestrians nearby who witnessed the encounter, write down their names and contact information if possible. This proactive approach to evidence collection is what separates a passive participant in the legal system from an informed citizen who understands the importance of verification. It is also important to reflect on the officer's conduct throughout the stop. Did they remain professional, or did their behavior shift once you invoked your rights? Did they perform a search of your vehicle despite your clear refusal? And if so, what justification did they provide at the moment? By capturing these nuances while they are fresh, you provide your future legal counsel with the tools they need to hold law enforcement accountable to the standards of the law. Remember that the goal of this documentation is not to dwell on the stress of the event, but to transform that experience into a structured set of facts that can be analyzed and acted upon in a professional setting. As we conclude this discussion on navigating the complexities of a matching description stop, it is essential to return to the core purpose of this educational material. The information provided in this series is intended to empower drivers with a high-level understanding of common legal concepts, procedures, and the importance of maintaining a calm, rights-focused demeanor during police interactions. However, it is critical to understand that this content is for general educational and informational purposes only. It does not constitute personalized legal advice, and the information presented here should not be interpreted as creating a lawyer-client relationship between the speaker and the viewer. Laws regarding traffic stops, identification requirements, and search and seizure vary significantly from one state to another and are subject to frequent changes through new legislation or court rulings. Furthermore, every individual situation is unique, and the specific facts of your case can drastically alter the legal landscape. Therefore, it is imperative that you verify the specific laws and regulations in your local jurisdiction and consult with a qualified, licensed attorney if you have questions about your specific circumstances or if you need legal representation. An experienced lawyer can provide the tailored guidance necessary to navigate the complexities of the legal system and ensure that your rights are fully protected according to the statutes of your specific state. By staying informed and seeking professional counsel when needed, you are taking the most responsible steps toward ensuring your safety and your liberty on the road.